And I am absolutely thrilled to bits to say, Julian Fellowes. Are you sitting comfortably?
There you go.
How difficult was it, Julian, to break it to the gentleman sitting on my left, that this was it and you'd fallen in love with Trollope?
No, we jointly, we three all decided that the 6th series would be the last. We had actually thought of ending it at the end of 5, but then it just seemed a bit cramped, and we thought we needed one series that really was essentially all about resolution of the whole thing. And that was a joint decision, and then we told ITV, or Gareth did, and they were fine, weren't they? Nobody sort of screened the place down.
No, I think, you know, the people, particularly in the States, they say, oh, well, surely PBS would want the show to go on for 20 years and ITV would want it to end and all of that, but there's been such integrity with the whole way that the show's been looked after, and really when we said to ITV and to PBS in the States that we think this is the end, total support.
But an extraordinary challenge, because one of the great strengths from start to finish has been the sowing of seeds here and there. Where has he gone? What is she now doing? Will they resolve this, that and the other? Did that change the kind of conversations that you had, knowing that these were the last pieces in the last series?
Well, a little bit. I mean, I think...
That was for Liz.
Oh, Liz.
You carry on.
No, I was going to...
Liz first, and then
you said.
Well, I think we knew, obviously, some time ahead that we were bringing this to an end. And so, I mean, and by some time, I mean a year and more ahead. So, because, you know, for Julian, he had the opportunity to, it helped us plant these things very definitely through series 5. And that was where it became very clear that at the end of series 4, we weren't going to be able to wrap up everything by the end of 5.
Sure.
And so it didn't change that really.
You now.
No, I mean, I think you always leave slightly open-ended stories, because life is a slightly open-ended story until you die, and you can't kill the entire cast. So, you know, there's a sense, will this turn out well, won't it turn out well? We haven't completely plugged everything, but we've sort of shown what the next chunk of everyone's life would be, you know, and I think that's right. I mean, I think that was, I think it's satisfactory. I hope it is.
You nodded to the notion of a movie, both in Hollywood and at the BAFTA thing at Richmond the other evening. But that's quite a challenge, because does that then contradict everything that you've just said about, you know, time and lots up, and you know, you would say life is an open-ended thing, but if there were to be a movie, would it be starting in 1927 and then going forward, or would it be a retrospective of the whole saga?
That remains to be seen.
What do you think would work?
But I think that the strange thing about it, were there ever to be a Downton movie, it strangely has to be just like a TV show, and yet at the same time completely different. And I think that would set a number of really interesting challenges, and I think would be a whole other medium for the audience to enjoy, as I say, if and when it ever happens.
One of the great things about the series, in my view, is the characterization. I mean, the lines are lovely and the storylines are both fascinating, heart-wrenching, but also politically and socially quite interesting. But at the pounding heart of the thing are characters who we either learn to love passionately or people we can't bear the sight of but can't wait to see them in the next series. In creating them, did you fall in love with them? Were there favourites?
Oh, I think I love them all. I love them, but I think also it's a joint thing. When a part is very well cast, the actor starts to bring qualities into the characterization that you then start to write for. So it becomes completely collaborative. And I think that was true with all of them, that, you know, Mrs. Patmore wasn't all that funny at the beginning, but when we realised how funny Leslie Nichol was, then you start to write for that, and then she becomes the downstairs Violet in a way, and so these things develop. I mean,
and then becomes the Foreign Secretary in this in this piece that we've just enjoyed.
But I'd never written a series before. I'd written a serial where the whole thing's finished before you cast it and make it. So this ongoing quality of a series, I think, was pretty new for all of us, really. Well, not so much for Gareth, who'd done a few, but for Liz and me. It was a new experience, that it is a work in progress all the way through as you're making it. And that was very interesting, actually.
The thing at Richmond was a BAFTA in recognition of the whole piece, as it were. And there's been specific recognition in the past for art and so on and so forth. When you were at that level as a series producer or an exec producer or writer, does that still matter? And did you feel a little, well, that's about time too?
It matters, yes. It's very, I mean, all of us as human beings like recognition and acknowledgement of work, of course. So I think the thing to say about BAFTA is that we know it's very special to be acknowledged by your own country. It's been wonderful to have the US recognition that we've had, and in fact the global recognition. But we were feeling, gosh, it would be lovely to have something from the UK, and therefore when we heard that BAFTA wanted to make this special tribute, and they have only done it once before with Harry Potter, which I think is on a very similar tone to us. It was an enormous global success, but was not going to fit into the categories in the same way at BAFTA, at their regular awards. And so BAFTA recognised the unique contribution both those projects made, and we were thrilled to bits, and we had a very lovely evening on Tuesday.
People like John Whittingdale, recently appointed Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, has gone one step further than saying this is a fine piece of work and thumbs up for you guys and gals, but it actually has contributed to the British economy. I mean, not only in terms of production and jobs and employing British talent, but also rejuvenating parts of British tourism as well. I mean, is that just that's a nice little sideline, or is there a conscious effort to reflect the country that we live in, the country that looks after us?
It's obviously a byproduct of the whole thing, in the same way that Peter Fincham said before the screening that there was never any discussion at all about the international appeal of the show. We were just making the show that we all wanted to make, and ITV supported that. What's happened through, I think, through its enormous success in the United States and other key territories around the world, it has become an absolute flagship piece of British content, and I've become increasingly interested in the way that I've seen it rolled out in China, in the United States, in Italy, all sorts of different parts of the world, as a sort of badge of Britishness. And it is, we know that it has indirectly had a significant impact on British tourism, on the number of visits to historic houses, and I think we, the three of us, would be very proud to think that this show has played a part in rekindling interest in Britain's heritage and stately homes, and I hope making these, Peter again said this morning he'd never heard of Highclere Castle before we started. Well, now it's one of the most iconic historic buildings in the world. And if we've created and revived an interest in that, I think that is something we would have been, if we'd known that when we set out, we'd have been delighted about. It does, I think, also plays a big part in promoting British exports generally around the world. As I say, it's not what we set out to do, but I think there's a wonderful thing it's doing for UK PLC generally.
Either Liz or Julian, and I hear what you say in the conversation that took place with Peter, but is there a conscious effort when creating it, whether writing or producing the series, that this is something that needs also to play well in the United States of America and in China? Or is it a take it or leave it attitude?
I don't think as conscious in that way. I think there is a conscious effort on my part, our part, to deal with issues that were current at the time of the series when they were living, yes, but also have some relevance today and strike a chime with us. So whether we're dealing with hospitals or hunting or whatever it is, these are issues that the public is aware of. I think if you built a whole episode around trying to find a new still room made, you'd be slightly stuck for modern relevance. And we tend to stick with issues that, again, are not nationally bound. I mean, most of the problems we have in this country are shared by, certainly in Europe, but probably far more than that.
Grantham didn't have to have an American wife. Churchill has an ancestor who had an American partner, obviously, but that helped.
Well, I think, we weren't thinking in those terms, as Peter said this morning, about foreign sales. The advantage for me of having the American wife, who were a great phenomenon of the 1880s and 90s, these nice dollar princesses who arrived to save a way of life that they outlived for the most part. But the advantage for me was it gave me a central character who was not dyed in the wool of the English upper class upbringing. So you could have one of the principal characters who didn't take all that stuff for granted, but questioned it, which Cora did.
Yes.
And as the world changed, in fact, it changed towards her. And you know, she was really ahead of her time in English terms. I mean, that was completely truthful, that these American girls were brought up in the 1870s and 80s in a way that wouldn't happen in this country until the 1920s. So that was her advantage for me. The fact that we would have a central American character for American sales was much more clever than we were, really.
I think you have to have all the decisions you make when you're producing something have to be narratively driven.
Yes.
I don't think you can start tailor-making things for specific characters or nationalities. It would be a bit of death.
Yeah. Penultimate question to you, and then final one to you, Julian, if I may. The penultimate one to you is that I don't know where we go after episode 1, genuinely, but I know episode 1 intimately, having watched it and thoroughly enjoyed it. And there are a number of themes I want to finish off with you, Julian. But one of them, whether it's Lady Mary's ability to run the estate and not needing a successor to Tom, or whether it's the lovely kitchen maid worrying about where her books are because her studies still matter. Egalitarianism and equality is a pounding theme, not simply nodded at, and you're driving that as the series producer. I mean, that's quite bold in what is a high standard costume drama, but one that really has a pounding brain as well.
Well, and it's very reflective of the time in which this is set.
Yeah.
You know, there were times where there was the undercurrent of unrest, whether it be class-wise or between the sexes.
Yeah.
It was there, and it was not going to go away. And that's what's been the joy of this series, is being able to chart all of those shifting sands across.
Because I remember when we spoke last year, we'd just seen the first Labour government, and
Exactly.
that was a reflection of all of the stuff that was going on. I jotted down, as I was watching it in my study the night before last, some of the themes, and everybody who knows you knows that apart from being a great writer and actor, that also you now have a peerage, and so you are immersed, as it were, to a degree in the political landscape, and I know you've always had an interest in that. But I jotted down hunting straight away, and here's the Prime Minister wondering whether or not we should have another vote on the hunting ban. I jotted down reorganisation of the health service, cottage hospital versus the Royal County, what have you. I jotted down the equality issues that Liz and I have just talked about, and wages and restructuring the workforce and so on and so forth. A reflection of the times, yes, or questions that you, as a writer, want us to think about?
Well, I mean, I think it's things we are thinking about. That is the appeal of those subjects for us, that they were concerns of the time, but they're still concerns of our own time. But I just remember seeing a cartoon, I've got a Punch cartoon at home from something like 1923, and a woman is sitting at her dressing table with her maid, and she says, Watkins, whatever her name is, "What is the cause of this difficult servant problem?" And the maid answers, "Well, it's like this, my lady. You're going down and we're coming up." And when I first saw it, I was struck by how interesting that was as a result of the First World War, that the First World War did shake everything, and how interesting that would be to explore. And then later in my life, Downton came along and gave us the opportunity of this very febrile, changeable period with many similarities to our own, and you know, organised labour, the change of travel, all sorts of things.
So there was a class edge to the blackmailer, beyond simply reminding folk what
There's
was
also
on.
the issue of education, though. I mean, you've written about education through all 6 of these seasons, and it will play a big part here. That idea of that being the one key to social mobility and so on.
Well, and it was always the cry, not just of the Fabians, but the early socialist education was the key demand. And so it felt right that we should illustrate what a change education could bring into a life at that time.
Good. Thank you very much indeed. Can we have the house lights up, if that's possible? We've got about 10 minutes now where it is your turn to put questions. If you would, exactly as my friend over there has just done, pop a hand up, we'll get you a microphone, and as a courtesy, you all know each other, I'm sure, but if you could just remind us of who you are and where you are from. You first, sir.
Thank you. Ian Wiley, freelance. A question for Julian. We know that by the end of the series we'll have said goodbye to all of these characters in different ways and said farewell to them. Can I ask you to describe your emotions when you were writing these scripts and also now the process is all but over?
I first of all have to say I'm as deaf as a post, so I now need a little bit of help.
When you were writing what you knew was the final series, having become as close as you were to the characters that you'd created, what sense of emotion did you feel when you were writing what were their, as it were, final words, final scenes? Is that a reasonable reflection?
You know, the thing about fans that's always bewildering is when they can't tell the difference between the character that's been played and the character of the actor who played them, and they get all merged. And I think I'm guilty a bit of that the unreality of the show I sort of slightly forget, because they've been so real to me for so many years now. For 6 years I've been going with these people, and so I do think you have a little sort of sadness, however idiotic it is and sentimental. You do feel rather sorry to say goodbye to these people, because I've enjoyed the creation. I mean, I can say that because I only regard my own contribution as very much part of it, not all of it. I mean, the actors, what they bring to them is a huge amount of why these people are interesting. And, you know, I'm sorry to see them go. I think the other thing is the show worked very well. I'm very unlikely to be involved in anything that is as successful again. And so, of course, I say goodbye to these golden years with a slight pang.
Thank you very much, Steve. There's a gentleman too up there. Was there a hand up here or not? Was that my hand? Oh, it's your telephone. That's fine. You, sir.
Hello, this is Ian Burrell from The Independent. I'd like to ask Julian, you mentioned that you're headed towards a conclusion in Series 4, so conclusions to the whole thing, and certainly Series 5. Was there ever a concern that Downton could go beyond its sell-by date and that the legacy, the great legacy of the show could somehow be damaged?
Well, I got that one.
Thank you, Ian.
There's always that concern. With any show, you don't want it to go on and start to fall away and start to dwindle. I think that's completely standard, and we could probably all name favourite shows that we adored for the first 3 or 4 seasons and then gradually lost interest in.
Which ones might they be, Julian?
No names, no but
I tried, ladies and gentlemen.
that was a concern. We wanted to try and be sure that we would go out when people were still sorry. And actually, as part of the answer to the chap who asked about awards, one of the nice things about being nominated and things is that you do have this sense that you're still a sort of player. You're still in the running, and we've been very lucky in that. And so it seems the right time to go while we're still sort of firing.
Thank you very much, Ian. I can see a woman there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows. Would you be kind enough to pass the microphone along? Most kind of you. Thank you.
Neela Debners from The Express. I just wanted to know, just going forward, what kind of what kind of historical events would you like to kind of see the Downton characters experience if you were taking the show kind of forward in whatever incarnation?
I want to see them in the 70s.
I really want to see Master George running the estate. I want to see him inherit in the late 1950s or something.
Which school would you have gone to?
Oh, Eton or Harrow, I suppose.
Well, we know Robert was at Eton because he talked about it.
Yes.
So I think probably Eton. Although I don't think Matthew would have been to Eton. He would have been to Oundle or something.
For those of you who are not aficionados, Google it. It's really worth it. Do you want to come in on that?
Of which school?
No, I'm just the lovely question about if you were going. You've said 1970s. If you were to take it, just one Doctor Who moment of.
No, I would follow the story of Master George.
No, that would be the one,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. And all of the events that affected a child.
Okay. Until the end of the 70s, it was very uphill trying to keep these shows on the road, and I think there probably is something in that.
Julian, the thing I'd like to ask you is, with all the success globally, what kind of pressure, as the writer, did that put on you? Were there moments where you think, oh my God, I've got so much to live up to? Did you ever have blank moments? How much of a pressure was it writing for 6 series?
Well, I mean, people always say it's a terrible pressure when you're writing a hit. The only time there's no pressure at all is when it's a flop. So, on the whole, I think most of us would rather have pressure and a hit, really. I mean, every now and then, towards the end of each year, when I'm sort of scribbling away and they're saying, we must have a new character list, we must know if there are any more locations in 9, you know, and you do get slightly hysterical, but I you know, that's the way of it, isn't it?
But never a moment when you go, oh my God, the nightmares, you know, any nightmares, you know,
My lord does not do nightmares.
I think I do get a bit shouty every now and then.
And my favourite quote from you about this topic was when somebody asked you about writer's block, and you said, I haven't got time for that. You said, I just sit there in front of my computer and see what dribbles out.
Well, deadlines are the key, but they're the key for all of you. If we didn't all have deadlines, we'd never get anything done, most of us.
All right, 2 more, which I think we've spotted. There was another woman there, yes, and I think somebody, Guy, right in the middle at the back there, and then we'll have to move on to the next panel. So you first, Mum.
Hi, Eleanor from Press Association. If you did a Downton Abbey film, do you know, have you had any indication of whether the cast would be on board?
Well, I don't suppose we could do it without them.
The whole
We
cast?
do the prequel.
So that's all in for it, all up for it. Gentleman there in the middle.
Yeah, you mentioned in answer to an earlier question how with any show it's a concern that you want to stop while people are still wanting more. But coming to the end of the show as it is now, do you still have lots of storylines rattling around in your head, or have you said everything you feel that you wanted or needed to say in this story? Do you still have things you would say if you could about the characters and about the family going forward?
Well, you know, if we were making 2 more series, I'd have to think of some more stories. You know, but we're not. I think there are some of the characters could have possibly been developed and gone on and done different things, but it isn't really that. It's not the lack of material or the fact that the actor doesn't want to go on with it. It's not that. It's more a general feeling that if we stop now, the audience will not be conscious of having had enough of it. That if we go on too long, they will start to feel we've had enough of this, bring on someone else. And that's what we wanted to avoid, really.
I'm going to draw a line there. I hope with no discourtesy either to you or to my 3 guests, but we have some more hope for you to each question and then to each question as well. But for the time being, our thanks to you for great questions and to your attendance, and join me, please, if you would.